But I don't want to shift your attention away from the results of the COVID jabs. As many of you guys know, as somebody who lost their job over this is something that I'm very passionate about, and uncovering what is actually happening to those that did take these jabs is a top priority, and we're learning more and more about it every single day. There's a new study out, and I found this on X yesterday, and I haven't heard about this angle in regards to the serious brain and spinal cord adverse events that have taken place for those who have taken the jabs. Now, obviously, this is something that is very, very important to us. And joining us now is Nicolas Hulscher. He, of course, is an epidemiologist and administrator at the McCullough Foundation. And he outlines all of this over at the focalpoints.com, which is a Substack page where they outline and they push and they promote all of these really important studies that you should all look into. I want to thank you for being here, Nicolas, and kind of wanting to give you the stage here to walk us through this new study that you guys have released. It just kind of outlines, again, these brainal and spinal cord adverse events. And obviously, there's now 63 links here that I want to just say that's very, very alarming. So what are some of the details behind this?
Yes, well, thanks for having me. And yeah, this study is very, very, very alarming. So what we did was we looked in the vaccine adverse events reporting system back from the 90s all the way up until 2024. And we compared how much more likely adverse events were occurring with the COVID shots compared to the flu shots or all the other vaccines since the 90s. When it occurs 2 times more often, that's defined by the CDC and FDA as a serious safety signal. We identified 63 of these serious safety signals, and they include all sorts of very bad adverse events for the brain and spinal cord, such as meningitis, so inflammation of the brain's protective barrier, such as encephalitis, inflammation of the brain itself, spinal cord inflammation, myelitis, Creutzfeldt-Jakob's disease, the human equivalent of mad cow disease. This was 800 times more likely with the COVID shots compared to all of these others. And so it's inducing this protein misfolding in the brain, this prion-like disease. These infectious proteins are propagating in the central nervous system. So this is very, very serious. We identified brain, central nervous system, brain, and spinal cord abscesses, these pus-filled lesions filled with infection. So what appears to be happening, and also demyelination syndromes. These are when the protective sheath on your neurons becomes destroyed. So it literally wipes those out. And then herpes reactivations in the central nervous system as well. So why this is happening, we identified, is because the blood-brain barrier is literally becoming destroyed. It's allowing these pathogens, the vaccine mRNA, lipid nanoparticles, the spike proteins, the frame-shifted proteins, and the misfolded prion-like proteins, these amyloidogenic proteins, to enter the brain from the blood. So this is very, very serious. And we have to remember 80% of Americans took at least 1 dose of these injections. So this is not something to play around about. And this explains why a recent study came out about a month ago, that cognitive impairment is skyrocketing in America right now. It's not going down. It's just skyrocketing. A study by Dr. James Thorpe and colleagues corroborated this data, found 86 serious neuropsychiatric adverse events with these shots, including homicidal behaviors, psychosis, schizophrenia, suicidal ideations, violent behavior, all sorts of horrible things, depression, the brain clots, 3,000 times more likely. And you could just keep going on and on and on, delusions. So these 2 studies now indicate that the blood-brain barrier is becoming destroyed, the neurons are becoming destroyed, so you will literally have less brain cells. And unfortunately, we see these manifestations of these psychiatric conditions.
Okay, so I wanted to ask you this. I got a couple of questions to follow up with this, because it's just like an absolute bombshell of adverse reactions to the jabs that most of us probably didn't know were taking place. We had some insight. We knew that this was causing heart issues, but the depths of this are even more significant than most even understood. I know that there was the issue of, let's just say, Pfizer forced experts to drag them into the courts to get their 55,000 pages of data that they had kind of put together, their information that they put together, and they forced them to sue. Now, I know that information was officially given over, and several experts, including Dr. Naomi Wolf, were sifting through it and finding all of these things. Was any of this known prior to the big push for Americans to get the jabs?
Yes, yes, particularly things such as encephalitis and some of these infectious reactivation syndromes. A lot of this was already known beforehand. They knew about all of this. We have to remember that Pfizer is is a criminal enterprise. You look at their track record; they have over 100 criminal penalties documented, spanning all sorts of things such as bribery, false advertising, kickback schemes, all sorts of horrible things. They've paid out over $10 billion in these criminal fines. And so, yeah, they're not to be trusted. They fudged the trial data. They manipulated the trial data. There was fraud going on. There was 20 deaths in the original trial with their injections, with their mRNA shots. There was only 14 in the placebo group. So it literally killed more in the original trial, but they went ahead anyways. They tested all the stuff. They tested the biodistribution in rats before they rolled it to humans. They found it went to every organ system, to the brain, to the spleen, to the reproductive system, ovaries, to the heart, to the bone marrow. It went literally everywhere. But they didn't care and they rolled it out anyways, and now the population's facing the consequences.
Yeah, and you mentioned the ovaries. So many women that I know are trying to get pregnant, trying to start families with their husbands, and they're struggling. So many people, and it's shocking to me because I consider these people to be healthy, but they're having to undergo IFV, and it's just IVF. I'm sorry, and it's just something that they shouldn't have to deal with. But again, I mean, just between the jabs alone and other things that have happened, environmental toxins that we've taken in, it's no surprise that women and men are even having these issues, these infertility related issues. We're really competing up against a lot. But when it comes to these brain and spinal related adverse events, how common were these? Is this something that's a rare issue that's taking place amongst those who have taken the jab, or is this more common than we understand?
This is much more common than we understand because we have to remember these reports to VAERS, they're underreported by a factor of about 100.
Yeah.
So any one of these reports in VAERS, we can expect 100 times more actually occurring in the real world. And so since billions and billions of doses are given, we can expect probably at least 100,000 of these serious central nervous system adverse events among the population, probably in the millions globally for sure. And again, this is just the central nervous system, which is obviously vital, right? You don't want to be disrupting, your literal brain and spinal cord, which kind of controls, your nerves go through the spinal cord, control your entire body. You do not want that to be disrupted. But we found so many other things as well now, and all these other studies coming out. You mentioned reproductive health. A study came out by Karaman and colleagues this year. They injected mice with mRNA shots. It destroyed 60% of their non renewable egg supply, the primordial follicles. 60%. These don't come back. And so all the other eggs are kind of spawned from these base versions into primary, secondary, tertiary. So there will be no base supply. And this is corroborated now in human data by Manichi and colleagues. With 1.3 million women in this study, they compared the vaccinated to the unvaccinated. The vaccinated women had 33% lower successful conception rates. So this is very worrisome. We see birth rates declining. They're at all-time lows now. And so this mass mRNA injection program appears to have functioned as a mass sterilization program.
Yeah, it's gut wrenching. It really is. I remember when I was going through my issues over at Fox, when I was looking and seeking attorneys and legal experts to help me out with my battle with them. One woman who said she doesn't agree with me on my political beliefs, but she did take the jab herself, and she does believe. Sadly, she took it when she was pregnant, but sadly, she believes that it was the reason why she was dealing with a miscarriage. She had had a miscarriage just a couple of months prior to speaking to me, and she said that's the only thing that I could think of that happened. And And, this is the problem, right? Because we saw all these experts who said, oh, your babies are fine. You could still take the COVID jabs if you are pregnant. And now we know that they didn't have much in the way of data to prove just that, but they still pushed it on to these women who trusted them blindly. And it's just really upsetting. But it's not just that. It's also these mRNA jabs are becoming more and more widespread. It's not just COVID vaccines anymore that they're trying to kind of expand. And this has been going on for a long time now. But there's been very little in regards to discussions about turbo cancer and what these jabs are actually doing and how they are increasing turbo cancer. I know many think that turbo, in the mainstream media especially, think that turbo cancer is a myth. But then they can't seem to explain why so many young people are developing cancer and how it's developing and how it's spreading at a very rapid pace. So I know you guys over at thefocalpoints.com have just outlined another study in regards to that. Break down how mRNA vaccines are linked to turbo cancer for us.
Yeah, well, here at the McCullough Foundation, we've already published like 5 peer-reviewed papers on the mechanisms behind this. This is a very real syndrome. So what turbo cancer is, which was already defined now in a paper by Dr. Paul Merrick. It's a real syndrome. It's not a myth like the mainstream media claims.
Mm-hmm.
It's these sudden onset cancers. So you get the mRNA injection, and then you'll have a sudden onset or relapse of a pre-existing cancer that's usually detected at a very late stage. So it kind of progresses extremely rapidly. It's treatment resistant, and it's usually these very rare cancers that appear in young individuals. And sometimes they get the diagnosis and then they die shortly thereafter because of just how aggressive these are. And so, one plausible mechanism that we believe is central to this, and this has also many other implications, was we actually published last month the first peer reviewed paper documenting the very first evidence of genomic integration of this mRNA vaccine genetic material in a human being. We had a 31-year-old woman. She developed stage 4 bladder cancer within a year of 3 mRNA shots. We looked in her circulating tumor DNA, performed what's called multi-omic analysis, transcriptomic, and proteomic analysis. And we found literally within her chromosome 19, in the circulating tumor DNA, we found a 20 base pair segment of the Pfizer DNA plasmid reference sequence. And so it's this DNA is now a non-human chimeric hybrid. It goes from human to Pfizer to human. There's about a 1 in a trillion chance this was just an anomaly. And so now that we're seeing this genomic integration, we don't know how many people it's occurred in, but we suspect those at high risk of this integration are those with these turbo cancers. But then we also published another study. It was actually just accepted in a PubMed.gov journal. We actually found that these mRNA shots and those who develop cancer, they dysregulate thousands of genes, thousands, including those essential for tumor surveillance. P53 and BRCA, they're being turned off. It's allowing these cancers to propagate. Genes related to mitochondrial function are becoming disrupted, and genes related to immune function are also literally turning off.
Okay.
And so,
yeah, well,
yeah.
I was going to ask you this question, and sorry to cut you off there. What would be the purpose if we know that this is disrupting our genes? Why would they be even continuing to develop these mRNA vaccines and then lie to the American people and pretend like they're safe?
Right, because our public health agencies, our government, they're still captured by what we call the biopharmaceutical complex, this transnational syndicate that appears to be central in rolling out all this mRNA technology. With all this evidence we have, it's absolutely shocking that they're still allowed to administer this. It's shocking we see Albert Bourla in the White House, $70 billion deal to make cancer mRNA injections to cure the cancers they caused.
Yeah.
And so this all needs to change. This has to stop fast. We have to remember 2 massive population studies just came out looking at COVID vaccines and cancer risk. Over 8.7 million people combined in these studies. They found that the mRNA shots increase your risk of 7 types of cancer. 7. Colorectal, bladder, breast, thyroid, all sorts of cancers, gastric, all these cancers are increased significantly in the vaccinated compared to the unvaccinated with these large, massive data sets. So it's clear these shots unleashed a turbo cancer epidemic.
Yeah, I think it's very obvious that this was going on. The fact that they're not slow rolling this tells me that they know there's something wrong here. I truly believe, in my opinion, that that's what's going on here, is that they know that this is happening. I mean, any big pharmaceutical company, you would hope, would have our best interests, unless they are, of course, profiting off of the injuries or the long-term health issues that they're creating, and that's exactly what we're seeing unravel here. And I want to remind our audience, I think I was the first one to call out President Trump when he recently got his booster shot. The White House pushed out his health exam in an email to all of us, and it was late on a Friday evening. And I think most people are out drinking, having fun. But I, like the loser I am, sit at home and read emails that we get from the White House. And I was like, oh, what is this? He took the booster? It was absolutely jarring that he took the booster, and it's really upsetting that people around him aren't having serious conversations with him. Yesterday, we saw what happened at the White House and the Oval Office in regards to the big push to make weight loss medication cheaper. Sounds great, but we don't know the long-term effects. I know President Trump even said that he looked behind him, was like, do we know if this is going to be good for people in the long term? We'll figure it out later, and we'll just put out a warning later when it happens. But that shouldn't be the case. And I think Americans need to see through that and realize that although we agree with President Trump on a lot of his policies when it comes to these big pharmaceutical companies, that he's a little, this is his blind spot, it seems like. He doesn't really understand, and it's okay to criticize him on that front. But also, he doesn't have a lot of data to kind of sift through, because I noticed when just dealing with my own personal experiences, I have family members who, one particular person who was injured due to taking the COVID vaccines. And the first round, she became very injured, and it was instant. Within 4 hours, was dealing with seizures. And very few people wanted to discuss that. And it was disturbing, but the doctors refused to even fill out a VAERS report. They didn't want to fill this out. Doctors are very reluctant to do that. So President Trump doesn't even understand, I think, the full scope of the injuries that are caused, because a lot of doctors are fearful of filing a VAERS report on a vaccine-injured person. Do you understand, or do you know exactly why they're so fearful in doing that? Is there something that penalizes them for filling out that VAERS report?
No, nothing penalizes them. What appears to have happened is they are now captured under mass psychosis still since 2021. We have to remember about 99% of doctors took these shots, recommended it to their patients. And so, since they've given it to thousands of patients, they've taken 6 doses themselves. They can't backtrack. They can't get out of it in their mind to realize what a horrible mistake that they have made. And so they will utilize confirmation bias on all of the falsified data that the pharma companies put out, and still cling to the false reality that they're safe. So that appears to be what's happening. They got to understand what's happening. They got to read these studies coming out showing all this harm. And you're right, Trump has done many great things, but when he does things like this, when he takes gene transfer injections that are deadly, carcinogenic, and DNA altering, we have to call that out. We cannot just simply ignore that.
Yeah, and I think Americans need to realize that, listen, we trust the president on a lot of issues. This just seems to be a blind side for him. And I think that clip of him yesterday we played earlier in the show, of him admitting that he doesn't know the long-term effects of these weight loss drugs that they're now making cheaper and easily accessible for the American people. I think that needs to be the soundbite that so many honest news outlets need to be blasting out there, just so people understand that although it's great that he's making pharmaceuticals inexpensive for Americans, that we need to realize that we don't know the long-term effects of these drugs, and we really need to be pushing for Americans to learn more, but also live and lead healthier lives. I think that's the big key point to all of this. Nicolas, I want to thank you for all the incredible work you guys are doing over at thefocalpoints.com. That is your Substack page, thefocalpoints.com. You're also a great follow on X. You did a great job outlining this and simplifying it for someone who is not a medical expert like myself. So we appreciate that, of course. So thank you for joining us today. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.